Shin Songyun can slay colossal dragons at 55, but honestly, who wants to be breaking their back that close to retirement? 30 years swinging a sword, and the best he could do was crack the top 100 in his country. A ranking that barely matters when the world is swarming with powerhouses who can just sneeze and take out legendary gods. As he surveys the battlefield, he notices his dungeon reward, a glowing skill book, and wonders if he can consume it like he has with artifacts before. Suddenly, a mystical energy engulfs him, and to his surprise, a portal opens. From it emerges an imposing figure in elegant attire, identified as the Constellation Late Bloomer Model Student. The Constellation blesses him for his hard work and praises his final strike. This entity is Shin's contracted constellation. Shin Songyun expresses gratitude to his constellation for forming a contract with him despite considering himself a mere third-rate swordsman. His celestial sugar daddy comes with benefits that only activate at level 850. At 900 things get even better. Stats doubled, then tripled. Amazing, right? Except Shin is level 650, which means his Grand Divine Blessing is currently about as useful as a gym membership he never signed up for. With a long road ahead and no shortcuts in sight, Shin can't help but question, was this really a blessing or just a glorified participation trophy? His constellation urges him to eat the skill book, prompting him to laugh as he was just about to do it. Determined, he prepares to consume it, channeling his skill Devour Artifacts, which is the only ability he obtained upon awakening. In the past, he tried boiling and frying artifacts in an attempt to understand his skill, but neither method had any effect. By the time he figured things out, 30 years had already passed. As he finally activates mana synchronization, a powerful surge of energy engulfs him, surrounding the skill book. He anticipates that when using this technique on an artifact of a suitable rank, his Devour Artifacts skill activates, but he regrets figuring it out too late. While others gain strength as soon as they awaken, he struggled for years to understand his ability. As he examines the skill book, he questions why there are no instructions, doubting whether it is even a real skill book. Just as he reacts, something within it stirs. His constellation apologetically informs him that there is very little information available about this particular skill, making it difficult to guide him. The constellation further advises him to compromise once more and restart mana synchronization, suggesting that he has plenty of time to figure things out. However, this remark irritates Shin, who angrily exclaims that he is almost 60 years old and does not have time to waste. Frustrated, he laments that if he had started a family earlier, his child would already be 30 and he might have grandchildren by now. Seeing his outburst, the constellation sincerely apologizes if his words were insensitive. Shin, however, reassures him that he did nothing wrong. It's just that his life is filled with regrets. Shin recalls an unforgettable figure from his past, someone he admired and aspired to become like. However, after decades of struggling, he now feels exhausted and too old to continue. He regrets not having more time, thinking that if only he were younger, things might have been different. His constellation remains silent. Determined to move on, Shin declares his decision to retire and cancel his contract with his constellation, advising him to find another player. However, as soon as he makes this statement, a powerful surge of energy engulfs the area, leaving Shin shocked. In the midst of the mystical energy, he sees his constellation performing a mysterious ritual, using the essence of his past experiences for something unknown. Shin suddenly realizes that what he is witnessing is his final moment as a 55-year-old. As regression begins, time itself begins reversing. Then, in a televised interview, Han Hyunjong, the CEO of Hyunjong Corporation, explains that dungeons serve as stepping stones for players to grow stronger. Watching this, Shin Songyun, now in his younger body, fully realizes that he has regressed back 30 years. He deduces that this regression must be a miracle caused by his constellation, as no other explanation makes sense. Though uncertain, he still chooses to embrace the situation, deciding to get back to work. He inspects his Venomoth's dagger, a bronze-tier artifact he had acquired in this past timeline. While it is a low-rank weapon now, with his knowledge of the future, he recognizes that Venomoth's dagger has a hidden skill. As he activates mana synchronization, the system determines the absorption rate of the dagger's basic stats, starting at 10% but increasing to 20% due to prior usage. While the rate is relatively low because he hasn't used the dagger for long, what truly matters is its hidden skill. As the synchronization begins, his appearance transforms, his hair turning white as powerful energy surges around him. He enters a space known as the Gap of Unconsciousness, a realm he must traverse whenever he consumes an artifact. He acknowledges that every time he enters, he feels nervous, as he never knows what kind of dish will appear. A glowing platter descends from above, revealing a perfectly cooked rotisserie barbecue chicken drizzled with olive oil. Relieved, Shin laughs, glad that it isn't something disgusting like a humid swamp centipede dish. Since the meal appears delicious and normal, he has no hesitation in consuming it. This allows him to gain power in a way no one else can. After consuming Venomoth's dagger, Shin permanently gains +2 agility and unlocks the hidden skill, Demon Bash. With the absorption complete, the dagger disintegrates, disappearing forever. While Shin acknowledges that it's a shame to lose the weapon, he isn't too concerned, as his true goal was to acquire its skill. Satisfied with the results, he prepares to head out and take action. Dungeon number 85 is managed by Team Yoon Daekyung. As preparations for the dungeon expedition continue, the team leader, Yoon Daekyung, is approached by the Porter group leader, who has urgent news. A team member has dropped out, and a newcomer who joined 4 days ago is supposed to take their place, Shin Songyun. To the Porter leader's shock, Shin isn't being assigned to the Porter team but the player team instead. He questions why someone who hasn't been awakened for long would be given such an opportunity. However, Yoon Daekyung firmly states that he personally approved it, dismissing any objections. Meanwhile, tension brews between the Porter team and the player team, as some players secretly view Songyun as expendable, expecting him to fail. The team leader, Yoon Daekyung, dismisses concerns about Songyun's lack of experience, asserting his control over team decisions. However, in reality, Yoon also sees Songyun as a disposable asset, expecting him to die early and serve as a scapegoat. As Songyun cheerfully announces his arrival, others just underestimate him due to his assumed incompetence. Shin Songyun arrives at the gathering point. Here also he immediately notices the intense and unfiltered expressions of the other players who are all scrutinizing him. Honestly, this blatant hostility surprises him. The team leader greets him enthusiastically, expressing relief that he isn't late on his first day as a player. However, his attention quickly shifts to Songyun's weapon, prompting a curious question about whether he is carrying a long sword. Songyun, smiling, casually responds that he studied sword techniques by watching YouTube videos, a statement that raises eyebrows. The team leader points out that a long sword is one of the most difficult weapons to wield, but Songyun remains determined, insisting that he will at least try to protect himself and asks for trust. Amused by his spirit, the team leader bursts into laughter, praising his enthusiasm and declaring that men need to have spirit just like that. With the introductions over, the team leader rallies the group, officially announcing the start of the dungeon raid, urging everyone to go wild. The large portal glows intensely as the players begin entering, and the leader instructs them to remain on standby upon entry. Among the players, some are already boasting about how many enemies they plan to kill, engaging in lighthearted banter about who will have the higher kill count. Meanwhile, as Songyun calmly walks ahead, the team leader has his eyes on him. Yoon Daekyung internally mocks Shin Songyun for claiming he studied swordsmanship on YouTube, finding it utterly ridiculous. He dismisses Songyun's confidence, believing the dungeons are far more deadly than a mere online tutorial could prepare him for. Daekyung just assumes that he's probably looking for an early death. Meanwhile, Songyun internally reflects on his knowledge of the dungeon's layout, recalling that this particular orc dungeon is infamous for being a wailing wall for new players, a place where many have met their demise. Daekyung, still confident in his assumption, believes that reality will soon humble Songyun. However, as the battle unfolds, his smug demeanor quickly turns to shock. What was supposed to be an insurmountable trial for a newbie turns into a massacre, but not for Songyun. Instead, the orcs lay dead all around him. Daekyung is left speechless while wondering just who this Songyun guy really is, unable to comprehend the power he just witnessed. Frequent appearances of orcs in games, novels, and fantasy settings have led to widespread assumptions about their weakness. However, while they may be weaker compared to legendary creatures like dragons, they are still strong, violent, and dangerous. This overconfidence in underestimating them has led many arrogant new players to recklessly engage them in battle, unaware of the risks. However, the reality quickly sets in when they are taken by surprise by the sheer strength of these creatures. Towering height of 250 centimeters and weight of 180 kilograms grants the orcs an overwhelming strength against humans. This brutal power has earned orcs the ominous nickname, the Wall of Lament, signifying how many inexperienced players meet their downfall against them. As the group progresses through the dungeon, a team member calls out to Shin Songyun, making it clear that he won't receive any special treatment for being a newcomer. Songyun just says that he will try his best, though he internally notes how unwelcoming these guys are to newcomers. When they further just keep on snapping at him, Songyun calmly asks if he can fight on the front lines when they encounter a monster. His request takes his his teammates by surprise. Now they even start questioning his sanity. But their conversation is abruptly interrupted by the sudden appearance of an orc. Panic spreads as one of the members shouts out in alarm at the sight of the massive creature. Songyun, on the other hand, reacts differently, his thoughts focused on the significance of this moment, his first battle after regressing. A warrior blocks a fierce attack from an enraged orc, bracing himself behind his shield. He angrily questions Shin Songyun's recklessness, expressing disbelief at his slow movements while wielding a great sword. Meanwhile, Shin Songyun, caught in the heat of the fight, dismisses the need for assistance and urges his comrade to focus on proving his own skill rather than engaging in unnecessary chatter. Just as he starts to gloat, an unexpected attack catches him off guard. Suddenly, the leader of the group charges in, deflecting the orc's blow with his shield in a dramatic display of strength. The impact sends the orc crashing to the ground with tremendous force, leaving the onlookers in shock. He turns to his team, berating them for treating the mission like a casual outing and commanding them to focus. A subordinate stammers an apology, while others marvel at the leader's power. As another orc steps forward, the leader instructs the team to stay back, declaring that he will handle this foe himself. The orc, undeterred, lets out a battle cry and rushes toward him. Yoon Daekyung, determined to prove his dominance, thrusts his sword into the orc, seemingly landing a fatal blow. The onlookers cheer, believing the battle to be over. Yet their celebration is short-lived as the orc suddenly roars, its eyes glowing red with renewed fury. It raises its weapon, launching another aggressive strike at Yoon Daekyung, who quickly evades. Frustration builds as he realizes his attack failed to deal a critical hit. Shin Songyun silently observes the battle, noting how despite being the highest-leveled fighter in the group, Yoon Daekyung still struggles to land decisive strikes. Yoon Daekyung continues his fight against the orc. His determination pays off as he successfully defeats an orc on his own. His teammates, astonished, exclaim in admiration, recognizing his strength. Daekyung, although trying to appear composed, boasts that it was nothing and asks if everyone is alright. His teammates respond enthusiastically, calling him dependable and praising his efforts. Just as they prepare to move forward, a loud, ominous voice shouts. The group turns to see a horde of high orcs charging toward them, their sheer size and presence sending a wave of fear through the team. One of the team members panics, pointing out that they are not just regular orcs but armored high orcs, and asks Daekyung what their next move should be. Hesitant and clearly intimidated, Daekyung suggests retreating for the team's safety, realizing internally that he barely managed to take down a single orc and that this new threat is beyond their capabilities. However, before anyone can act, Shin Songyun unexpectedly steps forward and asks if he can take them on. His question shocks the entire team, leaving them speechless. Some members react in disbelief, demanding to know if he has lost his mind, while another apologizes to the team leader, claiming he should have trained Songyun better. Shin Songyun charges forward, ignoring warnings from his companions about the danger. He swiftly maneuvers, using his greatsword to deliver a devastating blow, splitting a high orc in half. His teammates are left in shock. As he inspects his status screen, he wonders if his low level is limiting his capabilities. More high orcs charge at him, but Shin Songyun remains unfazed. He acknowledges his low level but confidently states that his experience compensates for it. Shin Songyun leaps into action. His blade leaves a glowing, crimson trail in the air as it descends upon his opponent. A massive armored orc wields a giant weapon and roars in response, bringing down its heavy axe toward Shin Songyun. As he swiftly dodges the attack and keeps taking them down, saying that he killed countless numbers of them when he was younger. His stunned comrades questions if that is really Shin Songyun. Now they believe that he might just take all of the enemies down by himself. As the armored orc retaliates with a devastating strike, Shin Songyun asks the orc to stop being so dramatic and activates a hidden skill called Demon Bash LV1, which momentarily stuns the orc, restricting its movement for 2 seconds, making the stupid orc an easy kill. His teammates question how someone who awakened only 3 days ago could display such immense strength. The skill Songyun used wasn't just a basic hindrance ability. It lasted far longer than expected, even surpassing the feats of named players. The group begins to question reality, with one even wanting to ask just what kind of YouTube video Songyun watched to become so skilled with a greatsword. A system notification appears, congratulating Shin Songyun for leveling up and granting him the F-rank title Fearless Immature Puppy, which provides a +5 boost to evasion. While he acknowledges the level up, he is more intrigued by the title, finding it unexpected yet beneficial. The system then prompts him to allocate a bonus stat point, to which he casually responds that he already knows exactly where to put it. Shin Songyun decides to invest his available stat points into luck, realizing its direct impact on skill hit rates and artifact drop rates, a lesson he had learned too late in his previous life. As his luck stat increases, the others remain bewildered by his his sudden growth. One of his teammates, still in disbelief, questions whether he is really Shin Songyun. The group's leader presses him about the hindrance skill he used in battle, asking where he obtained such a rare ability. Songyun, unable to reveal the truth about his regression, simply claims he received the skill upon awakening. His answer does little to satisfy the leader, who grows frustrated and demands to know how such a thing is even possible. He accuses Songyun of avoiding the question and speculates whether his extraordinary power is due to sheer luck, suggesting that he may have obtained a diamond rank artifact or something even rarer. In response, Songyun casually offers the leader his weapon to inspect. The leader hesitantly takes the sword, expecting it to be some kind of legendary artifact. However, upon examining its details, he is shocked to find that it is nothing more than an ordinary, faded greatsword with no special abilities, leaving him even more confused about Songyun's overwhelming power. Leader has no idea how such a regular weapon could produce the powerful skill he witnessed. Despite 2 years of dungeon experience and reaching level 50, he himself has never acquired such a skill. His thoughts drift toward his share of the party's rewards, realizing how his standing might be affected. Suddenly, a teammate urgently calls out, alerting them that the middle boss has awakened. The leader, regaining his composure, acknowledges the call and instructs the party to move forward. As they prepare, he admits that dealing with the minions was much easier thanks to Shin Songyun's efforts, but warns him not to overstep his limits. He further asserts that despite Songyun's skill, it will not be effective against the upcoming demon orc. Hearing this, Shin Songyun smirks to himself, internally recalling the real reason he returned to this party after his regression. Shin Songyun asks if he defeats the demon orc by himself, can he claim the artifact as his own, which will drop as a reward for doing that. Leader certainly was not expecting this. The party distributes rewards based on individual contributions. The artifact Shin is talking about is the Crimson Stone, an extremely rare item, obtainable only by defeating demon orcs. Even after slaying hundreds of these creatures, the chances of obtaining the stone are incredibly low. Reflecting on his past life, Shin Songyun recalls how his team previously failed to defeat the demon orc, and another group was fortunate enough to claim the Crimson Stone. In that moment, a teammate had congratulated their captain on acquiring the artifact, leaving Shin Songyun confused. He had questioned how they managed to obtain it, realizing that such an item would fetch a high price in the market. The unique ability of the Crimson Stone is delay. It is one of the few artifacts possessing this skill. This is the very skill Shin desperately needs. Back in the present, Shin Songyun contemplates his party's loot distribution system, recalling that rewards are based on individual performance. He confidently asserts that if he defeats the next monster alone, there should be no issue in claiming the prize for himself. Shin Songyun evaluates his situation, knowing that obtaining the delay skill now is crucial for future events. However, he realizes that most experienced players would view his confidence as arrogance. The reactions of his party members reflect the skepticism, as they question his decision and mock his belief that he can handle things on his own. One of them bluntly asks if he has lost his mind, while another angrily demands to know who he thinks he is. As tensions rise, their leader unexpectedly concedes, telling Shin Songyun to do as he pleases, but only under the condition that the party fails to defeat the dungeon boss. This condition, however, does not faze Shin Songyun, who considers it easier than he expected. Meanwhile, the leader walks away, with the rest of the party members rushing to follow him. Despite his outward indifference, the leader internally seethes, irritated by Shin Songyun's overconfidence, believing he acts superior just because of one broken skill. The team leader determines to clear the dungeon and prove that experience triumphs over raw skill. He leads his team towards the next stage, intent on regaining his authority. As they enter the boss room, he is momentarily stunned by the sight before him, a towering, bloodthirsty demon orc emanating a menacing aura. Realizing the severity of the fight ahead, he quickly commands his team to prepare for battle. Despite the creature's terrifying presence, he reassures his party that, based on prior information, it should be an easy target if they coordinate their attack correctly. However, his thoughts soon turn towards Shin Songyun, who has been a constant thorn in his pride. He silently declares that he will not allow Shin Songyun to take control of this battle. Smirking to himself, he dismisses the idea of Shin Songyun achieving a solo victory. Shin Songyun watches as the team charges recklessly at the bloodthirsty demon orc, with their leader taking the lead. However, things go south quickly as the team is brutally overpowered, leaving their leader bloodied and in shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. As he struggles to get back up, Shin Songyun observes with a smirk, realizing that their failure mirrors the past. The demon orc looms over them menacingly as the injured leader panics, realizing their imminent doom. He questions why the these monsters are so strong, regretting the poor advice he followed from the market. Ultimately, he decides to retreat, signaling the team to fall back. Shin Songyun, however, remains composed, smiling confidently as if everything is going according to his plan, further frustrating the injured leader, who demands to know what is wrong with him. The demon orc's immense power forces the leader into a panicked retreat, confirming that their initial strategy was flawed. However, as the team pulls back, the leader warns Songyun, suggesting he may not survive if he stays. Unfazed, Songyun confidently prepares to face the boss alone, asserting that he won't die today. The battle begins, and while the demon orc vastly outmatches him in raw stats, Songyun relies on his accumulated experience. He skillfully parries the orc's attack, shocking the retreating team members. The leader watches in disbelief as Songyun deflects the massive axe, proving that he possesses strength far beyond their expectations. Shin Songyun steps closer to the demon orc, feeling the lingering sting in his hand from deflecting its attack. He quickly realizes that merely parrying its blows is the best he can manage for now. His gaze then locks onto the crimson stone embedded deep within the monster's chest, a sight he hasn't seen in a long time. His obsession with obtaining the stone stems from its unique ability, the power to combine the delay skill with his own Demon Bash. At first glance, Demon Bash already seems formidable with its 2-second stun, but Songyun knows better. Using his Devour artifact skill, he has the ability to merge different skill effects, and an idea strikes him. What if he could stack the stun effect of Demon Bash? If he successfully acquires the delay skill, it wouldn't just be a theory anymore. It would be reality. The perfect combination of Demon Bash and delay could grant him an infinite stun, a game-breaking advantage that would change everything. With this realization, his determination sharpens. He must claim the Crimson Stone at all costs. Shin Songyun taunts the demon orc, asking if something is wrong before deliberately provoking it into attacking again. Enraged, the monster roars and charges at him, swinging its massive axe with lethal intent. But Songyun remains calm. This is exactly what he wanted. The more the orc repeats its predictable attack patterns, the easier it becomes to spot its weaknesses. Timing his movement, he swiftly leaps and slashes its side. The impact forces the demon orc to momentarily release its grip on the axe as Demon Bash takes effect, stunning it for 2 seconds. From a distance, Dung watches in disbelief. He can't comprehend how Demon Bash is working on a middle boss, calling it outright overpowered. Meanwhile, Songyun mocks the orc, stating that while regular orcs are simple-minded, a demon orc should have been more formidable. Just as he says this, the monster shakes off the stun and retaliates with a devastating kick. The force of the blow is immense. Songyun barely manages to block it with his sword, but the sheer impact sends him flying backward. He regains control by stabbing his sword into the ground, steadying himself. That's when he realizes his mistake. He had completely overlooked the demon orc's self-regeneration ability, which lifted the stun effect. Now he's at a disadvantage. Demon Bash needs 15 seconds before he can use it again, which is precisely why he needs the delay skill. But if stunning the monster is no longer an option, then there's only one solution: defeating it outright. As the demon orc charges again, its growl filled with rage, Songyun doesn't back down. Instead, he deflects the incoming attack into the ground. Meanwhile, Dung and the other players watch anxiously. One of them urges Dung that they should leave. The fact that even Songyun's stun isn't working means they don't stand a chance. Yet Dung doesn't move. He watches closely, trying to understand what's happening. He knows that Songyun's stun shouldn't work, and that there's an overwhelming gap in their stats. But then why does Songyun remain so composed? If he was just some rookie, how was he standing his ground against such an opponent? Songyun is pushed back again, but his confidence never wavers. He calmly tells the demon orc that he has faced countless situations like this before. If he isn't strong enough to overpower his enemy, then instead of trying to cut them down, he must focus all his power on a single point, using their own strength against them. The demon orc charges once more, but this time, Songyun is ready. Timing his strike perfectly, he thrusts his sword forward, piercing the monster's chest while simultaneously shattering its axe to pieces. A system message appears: Middle Boss Demon Orc defeated. His level increases and he gains the E-rank title, Demon Hunter. The Demon Orc collapses lifelessly. The system explains that the Demon Hunter title grants a 5-fold increase in health regeneration when facing middle bosses or stronger enemies. This marks his second title, leading him to assume that this is another perk of being a solo player. But before he can process his victory, he notices Dung and the other players staring at him, completely stunned. Realizing that this situation could quickly become annoying, a simple solution comes to mind. Without hesitation, he suddenly exclaims that he barely survived the fight. Then, with a straight face, he turns to the group and dramatically asks, "What would you guys have done if your leader, Dake Young, hadn't already weakened the boss beforehand?" The players, caught completely off guard, immediately clung to Songyun's words, loudly claiming that they knew it all along. They turned to Dung, demanding to know exactly when he had landed an attack on the demon orc. Dung, still baffled, was about to question Shin Songyun when he caught the look in his eyes, a silent yet obvious invitation to save face. It was a test. Was Dung truly that clueless, or would he recognize the favor being extended to him? The unspoken message was clear. Songyun was handing him a way out. Before Dung could respond, the crimson stone floated out of the demon orc's corpse, glowing ominously. Realizing that Songyun was waiting for him to honor their deal, Dung clenched his fists, his pride taking a hit. With a bitter expression, he muttered that this was his complete and utter defeat. Determined to move forward, he swiftly turned to the team and redirected their focus. The final boss battle was next. The players eagerly agreed, but as they made their way upstairs, hushed whispers spread among them. There was no way Songyun had single-handedly defeated the demon orc, right? Now alone before the fallen beast, Songyun turned his attention to the crimson stone. He studied it for a moment, then casually muttered, "Should I just eat it?" The system promptly displayed its details. Silver rank artifact. Effect: delay, increases health and strength by 10. A crystallization of strength, tenacity, and endurance. With a smirk, Songyun activated mana synchronization and entered his gap of unconsciousness. Instantly, his hair turned a radiant white and his surroundings shifted. What happened next completely shocked him. The crimson stone transformed, not into an artifact, but into a steaming bowl of Master Chef's Byam Nun, complete with meat jelly. For a moment, he simply grinned in amusement. Was everything really going this smoothly? The thought of resisting such a classic dish was impossible. Without hesitation, he grabbed the chopsticks and took a perfect bite, noodles and pork together, savoring every moment. System notification. Per the 20% base stat absorption rate of silver rank artifacts. Strength +2. Health +2. Moments later, the bowl was completely empty, and with it, Songyun successfully acquired the special effect, delay. A new system notification immediately appeared. He could now bind delay to his existing skills. Just the thought of it sent a thrill of excitement through him. Wasting no time, he bound delay to his Demon Bash skill. System effect enhancement. If Demon Bash is used before the initial stun ends, it will extend the stun duration. The second stun is guaranteed. The third stun has a 90% success rate. The fourth stun has a 60% success rate. Any further consecutive uses have a 30% chance of sustaining the stun chain. As he emerged from his gap of unconsciousness, Songyun was completely floored. He had only theorized that a 4-second stun loop could be possible. But now, it wasn't just a theory anymore, it was real, and with this power, everything was about to change. As Dung approached Shin Songyun, he requested a private conversation. Curious, Songyun agreed, turning to face Dung, who explained that they were now at the entrance to the final boss room, the Orc Berserker. Songyun casually asked if Dung wanted him to join in later, but to his surprise, Dung firmly refused. Seeing Songyun's confusion, Dung clarified that, as a leader, he would be a failure if he didn't fully utilize a teammate as skilled as Songyun. Extending his hand, he proposed that they work together. Laughing, Songyun accepted the handshake but reminded him that his conditions still stood. Without hesitation, Dung agreed. Just then, a yellow-haired party member announced that the team was ready to enter. As Dung nodded and instructed everyone to stay on guard, Songyun noticed something strange. The yellow-haired player shot him a sharp glare. For a moment, Songyun was both surprised and confused. Meanwhile, Dung, oblivious to the tension, cheerfully called out, encouraging the party to push forward and even suggesting they celebrate with drinks afterward. As the others walked ahead, Songyun lingered behind, questioning what had just happened. Did he imagine it, or did that player really glare at him? As the group entered dungeon number 85's final boss room, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the chamber. The Orc Berserker slowly rose, its massive frame looming over the party. Everyone took their positions, preparing for battle, but before Dung could step forward, Songyun gripped his long sword and advanced first. Without turning back, he simply said, "Just stick with me." Dung immediately objected, warning him not to go in alone, but Songyun dismissed his concern with a sigh. He already knew the plan. Unlike the demon orc, the Orc Berserker had lower skill resistance, making it easier to stun. As long as he maintained control and precision, victory was within reach. Without hesitation, Songyun launched forward at blinding speed. The Berserker roared, charging toward him while wielding a mace, club, and flail. As he sprinted toward the beast, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Had he ever spoken with this much confidence before? When he was younger, he was afraid. As he grew older, he merely struggled to survive. But now, he refused to live that kind of life ever again. The Berserker's attack crashed down, but Songyun deflected it effortlessly. His mind was clear. His goal was set. He had to change his past, change his future, and prove it to everyone here. As the berserker lunged at him again, roaring in fury, Songyun didn't hesitate. He lifted his long sword with unwavering resolve, ready to carve his own path forward. From the sidelines, Dung stood frozen in shock as he watched Shin Songyun sever the orc berserker's arm in a single, devastating slash. The monster's agonized scream echoed through the chamber, yet all Dung could manage to mutter was, "He's a monster." Snapping out of his daze, he quickly commanded the others to capitalize on the berserker's 4-second stun and unleash everything they had. The team followed his lead, rushing in and hacking at the boss relentlessly. The orc's pained howls filled the room as it was overwhelmed by a storm of attacks. Moments later, a system message appeared, announcing their victory. The final boss, Orc Berserker, was defeated, and the dungeon, Altar of the Crimson Orc, had been cleared. As the players caught their breath, they exchanged stunned glances, marveling at how easy the fight had been. Some commented on how they hadn't even used a single potion, now realizing just how overpowered Shin Songyun's stun effect was. Meanwhile, he overheard a conversation among the porters. One of them asked if Songyun already had a personal porter and whether they should offer their services. Another porter immediately claimed they had been planning to ask first. Then, their leader abruptly shouted out that he needed to make a living too, leaving Songyun utterly baffled. The same people who had ignored him before were now desperate to work under him. He hadn't even considered hiring a porter, yet their attitudes had completely shifted. Suddenly, the system notified him of his level up and the acquisition of a new D-rank title. With overwhelming power, as he felt a surge of newfound strength, the system explained that his status effect durations were now extended by 10%. A 4-second stun was already devastating, but this boost made it even stronger. He knew how rare titles were, as he had never obtained one in his previous life. However, even this advantage was nothing compared to the legendary Ghostblade, Du Jiangsu, the title collector, the complete sword, and the strongest swordsman in Korea. Just 2 years after the Age of Players began, Jiangsu had shattered all records, surpassing level 500. In his past life, Songyun had admired him from afar, never even dreaming of reaching his level. But this time, things were different. This time, he could chase that legend. The realization sent a thrill of excitement through him. Noticing his expression, Dung raised an eyebrow and asked what he was doing. Flustered, Songyun awkwardly stretched, brushing off his thoughts. Dung, however, surprised him by handing over an artifact. Taken aback, Songyun asked what had gotten into him. Dung shrugged, praising him for carrying the entire fight and claiming it was only bronze rank, so he could afford to be generous. Still skeptical, Songyun raised an eyebrow, questioning if Dung wasn't being a little too honest. Smirking, Dung admitted that if the artifact had been valuable, he wouldn't have given it away. However, deep down, Dung knew the real reason. This was their last moment together. He may not have said it aloud, but even he could see the growing gap between them. Songyun was already stepping into a different world, one where ordinary players like Dung could no longer keep up. Meanwhile, a storm of jealousy brewed elsewhere. The yellow-haired player stood in the distance, clenching his fists in fury. He couldn't believe that Dung was favoring Songyun, all because he had shown off his skills a few times. After all the years he had spent as Dung's loyal follower, it now felt like he was being tossed aside. His frustration turned into bitter resentment. Clenching his jaw, he muttered curses under his breath, his anger festering like an open wound. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Back at his home in Songpa District, Jamshil, Shin Songyun erupted with pure joy, unable to contain his excitement. This was exactly why he had become a player. Checking his bank account, his eyes widened in disbelief. 6 million won. He could hardly process it. Porters typically made a mere $200 a day, yet Dung had given him more than double what the others received, plus a hefty bonus. That bonus? The Berserker Ring, a bronze rank artifact with the lighten special effect and an additional plus 10 strength. The ring was designed to draw out the wearer's blood rage, but what really caught his attention was its weight reduction ability. The lighten effect consumed 1 mana per second, reducing the weight of all equipped artifacts to just 1 gram. It was clear why it was only bronze rank. Most players would burn through their mana before even swinging their swords. But Songyun wasn't like most players. He had discovered his devour ability far too late in his previous life, but that only made him study it more intensely. Through relentless experimentation, he had learned that mana-reliant artifacts lost their mana cost entirely when devoured, even if they came with certain penalties. The more skills, the better. A smirk tugged at his lips as he began synchronizing his mana with the Berserker Ring, unfazed by the potential drawbacks. In a private club in Gangnam District, Seoul, tension hangs heavy in the air as the yellow-haired player slams his glass onto the table, frustration evident in his face. He insists to the massive man sitting across from him that he is telling the truth. Shin Song-yoon really has a 4-second stun. The man, however, narrows his eyes, his expression cold as he questions whether the yellow-haired player is raising his voice at him. Panic sets in immediately. The yellow-haired player's confidence crumbles, and he hurriedly apologizes, his hands shaking as he tries to backtrack. The man remains unreadable, taking a slow sip of his drink before leaning forward, his voice laced with indifference as he asks what exactly is expected of him in this situation. The yellow-haired player hesitates before suggesting that Song-yoon must be wealthy, possibly using an artifact that enhances stun effects. The man, still unimpressed, asks again what he is supposed to do about it. Desperate, the yellow-haired player clarifies that he is not looking for revenge, but rather a business opportunity. He points out that Dung seems to favor Song-yoon now, hinting at a shift in influence. The man smirks at this, noting that despite the denial, it seems like the yellow-haired player does, in fact, want revenge. From the side, a mysterious woman quietly remarks on how close the two men seem to be. The room grows heavy with tension. The massive man, now addressing the yellow-haired player by name, shifts his tone into something more dangerous. Before the yellow-haired player can react, searing pain rips through his head. A moment later, the realization sets in. His ear is gone. A blood-curdling scream fills the club as he clutches the side of his head, blood soaking his clothes. The man across from him, unbothered, swirls his drink and asks who he thinks he is. Without warning, he douses the fresh wound with alcohol, sending another wave of agony coursing through the injured man's body. The yellow-haired player convulses, unable to suppress his cries. The man tells him that he should consider this the price he must pay and that from now on, he will listen only as much as his missing ear was worth. Then, with a chilling finality, he demands to know where Shin Song-yoon is. The next morning, at Jamil 4-3 training grounds, Shin Song-yoon sits down to rest, still processing how the Berserker ring has changed everything. His stomach rumbles, a lingering side effect from consuming the artifact, but he reminds himself that light always follows darkness. Lifting his long sword, he rolls it effortlessly in his grip, taking note of how much lighter it feels. As he catches it mid-spin, a smirk tugs at his lips. Thanks to Devour Artifact, the mana cost has been erased, though the effect has been halved as a penalty. Even so, the weight reduction is significant, making him reconsider his approach. Switching to a greatsword he thinks might not be such a bad idea after all. Shin Song-yoon opened his status window and carefully examined his current progress. He had reached level 7, possessed 3 titles, had yet to form a constellation contract, and his stats read 325 health, 32 mana, and 307 experience points. As he assessed his standing, one thing became increasingly clear. He needed to start attracting the attention of the constellations. Since a player could only form a contract with one, the choice was crucial. Ideally, he needed a constellation that complemented his strongest stat, luck. However, without the necessary attributes to pique their interest, there was only one option left: train. For the next 3 days, he pushed himself through rigorous training and long-distance driving, his body aching from exhaustion. But the effort paid off. By the time he arrived at his destination, he had gained a new skill, ambidextrous sword training, level 1. The skill enhanced his adaptability with all sword types except daggers and one-handed longswords, making it a valuable addition to his growing arsenal. Looking ahead, his focus landed on dungeon number 101, a solo player exclusive dungeon. Normally, players waited months for a chance to enter, making this a rare opportunity. Just as he was about to step inside, the distant sound of an approaching vehicle caught his attention. Turning back, he spotted a dark car pulling up on the road. It was obvious someone had followed him. He didn't know their intentions, but one thing was certain: whatever they wanted would be settled inside the dungeon. The moment he entered, so did his pursuers. For men from the bar trailed behind their leader, their expressions shifting into confusion. They scanned their surroundings, expecting to see more players, only to find Song-yoon sitting calmly on a rock, as if waiting for them. It was then they realized the problem. This was a solo player instance, a dungeon that only allowed one person inside. There was no way they had entered the wrong place, which meant only one thing: Song-yoon had led them here deliberately. The massive man among them sneered, questioning his sanity. His voice carried amusement, but Song-yoon remained unbothered. Gripping his long sword tightly, he assessed his opponents. Their formation told him everything he needed to know: no healer, no mage. This wasn't a balanced team meant for dungeon survival. They had abandoned sustainability, forming a group purely consisting of swordsmen and an archer. It left no doubt in his mind. They were a hyena pack, a party specializing in hunting other players. The brown-haired man among them issued a warning: if Song-yoon died here, even his body wouldn't be found. But instead of fear, Song-yoon only smiled. He was well aware of the risks. In his past life, hyena packs had been completely eradicated by the relentless relentless surveillance of the Players Association. But right now, they still roamed freely, and he was more than ready to take them down. Among the enemies before him, the archer posed the greatest threat, a fact Shin Songyun had already accounted for. The archer urged his teammates to end things quickly, unaware that this was exactly what Songyun had planned. Taking out 4 enemies efficiently required a perfect setting, and this solo dungeon provided just that. As the brute of the group stepped forward, cursing loudly, their leader raised a hand, signaling for a more calculated approach. The brute hesitated, visibly frustrated, but reluctantly obeyed. Despite his initial restraint, he swore vengeance, promising to make Songyun suffer. Songyun, however, remained amused. He found it almost laughable how obedient the brute was despite his aggression. Having no patience for drawn-out battles, Songyun challenged them all at once, daring them to attack him together. The brute, his patience worn thin, grinned viciously before lunging forward with a massive sword, threatening to silence him permanently. But Songyun remained still, waiting. A dungeon operated by a simple law: survival of the fittest. Here, monsters existed solely to end his life, and only the strongest could claim the artifacts and rewards hidden within. There were no rules, no justice, only raw, merciless reality. The weak perished. The brute's blade descended. A single slash cut through the tension. Blood splattered across the dungeon floor. The remaining men froze, their expressions twisting in shock as their comrade's severed torso crumpled to the ground in 2 lifeless pieces, his sword clattering beside him. Songyun shifted his gaze toward the remaining 3, his voice disturbingly calm, almost indifferent. Panic immediately set in. The leader ordered them to keep their distance, barking commands for the archer to cover them while they repositioned. Without hesitation, the archer dashed to the side, declaring his readiness, though his mind still reeled from what he had just witnessed. He couldn't believe it. Songyun had just killed Sango, their brute of a swordsman, in an instant. It should have been impossible. Even if Songyun was reckless, he had somehow managed to reach level 100 despite awakening only recently. As the archer struggled to comprehend the situation, Songyun spun his sword effortlessly, his amusement evident. He questioned where they thought they were going. The archer responded instinctively, loosing 2 arrows in rapid succession. With effortless precision, Songyun slashed them midair, reducing them to pieces before they could reach him. The archer, stunned, shouted in disbelief. Before he could react further, Songyun hurled his great sword forward, the massive weapon cutting through the air before impaling the archer's body. The 2 remaining men froze in horror, their leader staring at the scene, unable to comprehend what had just happened. His voice barely above a whisper, he muttered in disbelief. The brown-haired man beside him, visibly shaken, questioned who or what they were dealing with. Assessing the situation, the leader's eyes locked onto Songyun. In that moment, realization struck him. Songyun had thrown away his only weapon. Seeing an opportunity, he immediately ordered the brown-haired man to attack. At the same time, Songyun rushed toward his embedded greatsword. The 2 men charged him simultaneously, swinging their blades down in unison. Just as Songyun reached for his weapon, he caught a glimpse of their attacks descending toward him from both sides. He barely dodged in time, the force of their strikes slicing through the archer's lifeless body instead. As they recoiled in shock, their eyes widened at the sight of their fallen ally, now reduced to bloody pieces. Meanwhile, Songyun hung upside down from his evasive maneuver, completely unharmed. Shin Songyun casually remarked on how close that had been, his tone light despite the carnage. The brown-haired man, still shaken from the encounter, called him insane. Unfazed, Songyun simply pulled his sword free, preparing for the next move. Before anyone could react, Jun, their leader, suddenly seized the brown-haired man by the head. Panic flashed across the man's face as he called out in alarm, demanding to know what Jun was doing, but his plea went unanswered. Without hesitation, Jun yanked his subordinate forward, using him as a human shield just as Songyun's blade carved an X-shaped slash through the air. The attack tore through the brown-haired man's torso, carving through flesh and bone, while also severing part of Jun's fingers in the process. Jun staggered backward, gripping his mutilated hand, his breath ragged. But before he could fully register the pain, Songyun landed smoothly on the ground, observing him with a cold, detached amusement. Then, as if merely confirming a passing thought, Songyun calmly asked if they were organ dealers. Jun's expression faltered, momentarily stunned by the accusation. Songyun continued, his voice unervingly casual. There was no way a group like theirs operated on trust or camaraderie. He speculated that their true purpose involved mana stone awakenings through illegal organ transplants. Though he spoke with ease, his certainty was absolute. He had seen too much in his past life to mistake them for anything else. For a moment, Jun was silent. Then, a dark chuckle escaped his lips. With a surge of desperation, he lunged forward, his blade flashing toward Songyun's head in a final act of defiance. But the strike never landed. Jun's sword froze mere inches from its target. Songyun smirked. Demon Bash had activated. Jun's eyes widened in horror as his body locked in place, the system's stun effect taking hold. His mind raced in disbelief. He recalled the minor cuts from earlier, refusing to believe that such insignificant wounds could have paralyzed him. The idea of a skill this broken existing was beyond comprehension. As Songyun approached, he informed Jun, almost lazily, that it was over. A wave of denial crashed over Jun. This couldn't be happening. He was supposed to be the one in control. He was supposed to decide who lived and who died. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. A fragmented memory surfaced in his mind. He had once assured his underlings that as long as they followed him, they could achieve anything. They had believed in him, praised him, but he had seen this look before. He recalled a man, one of his own subordinates, bleeding profusely, trembling, begging for his life. His desperate voice had echoed through the room, pleading for mercy. He had promised anything, just to be spared. Jun had ignored him. Without hesitation, he had severed the man's arm, leaving him to die. Even as the pleas continued, Jun had remained indifferent. He had always been the predator. Yet now, for the first time, he was trembling in fear. Songyun had drawn close. His voice was calm, almost gentle, as he leaned in to whisper a chilling question. "Have you never felt this before? Are you afraid now that it's your turn?" Jun couldn't answer. A moment later, the surface of the pond rippled, as blood seeped through the water at its edge. Shin Songyun calmly cleaned his sword, watching as the crimson stain dispersed into the dungeon floor. He reminded himself that he couldn't afford to grow accustomed to this. It hadn't been long since his regression, yet even now, he knew that his chances of becoming a constellation were slim. Still, he reasoned that everything that had just unfolded was nothing more than self-defense. His gaze drifted toward the pile of weapons left behind, just as the system displayed his latest rewards. 8 artifacts had been acquired from this dungeon alone. As he slipped on his coat, the system updated his progress. His level had increased by 10, bringing his consumed artifacts to a total of 11. His health had risen to 400, mana to 50, and all of his stats had seen significant improvements. While he wished that the earlier fight could have been avoided, the results more than justified it. He couldn't help but feel relieved that consuming artifacts didn't cause weight gain. Analyzing his current stats, it was clear he was already as strong as level 50 players. The sheer speed of his progress made him wonder just how long it had been since his regression. His growth was beyond comprehension. Reaching into his pocket, he retrieved a silver artifact, the recovery ring. Its special effect allowed for instant removal of status abnormalities at the cost of 10 mana per use, but if activated again within a minute, the mana cost would double. It still baffled him that the brute who had recklessly charged at him had been carrying an artifact this valuable. The realization hit: if he had placed absolute trust in his stun ability, he could have been in serious danger. A rare moment of unease passed through him. He needed to be more cautious. Without wasting time, he immediately began synchronizing his mana with the recovery ring. Elsewhere, a group of goblins trudged along a pathway when one of them suddenly sensed something behind them. Turning around, it spotted a figure standing in the distance, his long sword in hand, his eyes covered. The goblins snarled in confusion, noticing the eerie glow of the sword he wielded. Songyun knew exactly what he needed to do. Obtaining the Lucky Day title required something absurd: defeating 500 monsters with his eyes closed. The goblins remained frozen, seemingly hesitant to attack. Annoyed by their hesitation, he sighed in frustration. How long were they just going to stand there? Finally, a low growl escaped one of the goblins. He smirked. He could sense their presence without even seeing them. This fight wasn't just about earning a title. It was about refining his instincts. He focused, feeling the shift in the air, sharpening his hearing. This was what it meant to enter a heightened state, a space where instinct reigned supreme. The goblins finally charged, axes raised high. Songyun remained still. At the last possible second, he moved. His sword arced through the air, effortlessly cleaving through multiple goblins in a single sweep. Blood rained down, but instead of flinching, he felt exhilaration. Then, a sudden shift in the air. An arrow flew toward him. Without thinking, he reached out and caught it mid-flight, snapping it in half with his bare hand. The goblin archer froze in disbelief. Songyun grinned. He was getting the hang of this. Recognizing the progress he had made over the last few days, he taunted the goblins. urging them to come at him. They roared in fury, rushing toward him with reckless abandon. But it didn't matter. He moved like a storm, cutting them down one after another. Minutes passed, and soon, only one goblin remained. It barely had time to scream before his blade pierced straight through its body. As the final goblin collapsed, the system registered his accomplishment. His level had increased once again, and he had finally obtained the D-rank title, Lucky Day. Lowering the cloth from his eyes, he expected to feel a sense of achievement. Instead, it felt almost too easy. The system then displayed the title's effects. Lucky Day granted him plus 20 luck, and for every monster of the same type he defeated, his luck would increase by 0.1, up to a maximum of 10. A laugh escaped him. This was perfect. His luck stat was growing faster than most platinum-ranked titles ever could. Given its absurd potential, he estimated its value to be at least 500 million won, perhaps even $1 billion. Just as he finished calculating its worth, a distortion in space caught his attention. Behind him, a dimensional rift opened. His heart pounded as the system notified him of their arrival. 3 constellations had taken notice of him. The cleaner of a fallen dimension asked if he was interested in making others unlucky. The pilgrim of grand space found him intriguing and requested a conversation. The goddess of luck smiled at him, reaching out her hand. Excitement surged through him. At long last, the constellations had arrived. 3 powerful constellations arrived. The system announced their presence, confirming that they had taken an interest in Shin Songyun. Shin was momentarily taken aback. 3 of them had come at once, much quicker than he had anticipated. Smirking to himself, he reveled in the success of his performance, realizing that his display of skill had been enough to attract such powerful beings. Among the constellations, the goddess of luck descended towards him with a radiant glow, her beauty mesmerizing. As she floated down, he instinctively stepped back in surprise. He wondered if he had been too overconfident in his approach, reflecting that this was an entirely new experience for him. Having never attracted constellations in his past life, he hesitated for a moment before reassuring himself that confidence was key. His doubts quickly faded when the system confirmed that the goddess of luck was highly interested in him. She beamed at him, her smile filled with warmth, as the system further revealed that she was intrigued by the concept of a lucky swordsman, something she had never encountered before. Playing along, Songyun chuckled and acknowledged that he had always been told he was rather lucky. Meanwhile, the system displayed more notifications. Both the cleaner of a fallen dimension and the pilgrim of grand space had taken interest in him as well. The cleaner of a fallen dimension praised him for his hidden cruelty, a clear sign that his ruthless efficiency had not gone unnoticed. He recognized the constellation's reputation, recalling that it was commonly associated with slayers. It made sense. His recent massacre of goblins must have drawn its attention. The pilgrim of grand space, on the other hand, observed him with curiosity, intrigued by his true intentions. This particular constellation was known for its neutrality and deep understanding of the unknown. Realizing that all 3 constellations were interested in forming a contract with him, Songyun saw an opportunity. Rather than rushing into a decision, he decided to take his time and carefully evaluate his choices, ensuring that he formed a contract that would benefit him the most. Meanwhile, the pilgrim of grand space observed him with curiosity, though Shin found it odd that this particular constellation had appeared. From what he knew, the pilgrim usually only sought players with a saintly disposition, making its presence puzzling. He speculated that it might have been drawn in by the goddess of luck, who was already showing great interest in him. The goddess of luck was renowned even among constellations, making her attention both an honor and a strategic opportunity. As she gracefully approached him, she explained that she had no exclusive desires, meaning that even if he chose another constellation now, she would still allow him to form a contract with her later. This revelation astonished Shin. Having multiple contract options was an unprecedented advantage, something that no other player could normally achieve. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Before he could finalize his decision, a memory resurfaced, one of an archer capable of striking his target even when shooting blindly. Known as the Archer of Miracles, Hashimoto Yuki had been one of the most highly praised archers, possessing immense destructive power and a high luck stat. Many doubted the legitimacy of his legendary feats, dismissing them as exaggerated rumors, but Shin knew the truth. In reality, it was thanks to his 2 constellation contracts. The one who made the impossible possible was none other than the goddess of luck. Standing before 3 powerful constellations, Shin Songyun knew he had to think carefully. However, the constellations urged him to cast aside his hesitation and determine his own fate. While 2 constellations encouraged his decision, one subtly hinted that he might be making a mistake. mistake. Observing their competitiveness, Shin found it hard to believe how eager they were to form a contract with him. There was no doubt that the Goddess of Luck was an exceptional constellation, but a lingering concern remained: what if no other constellations ever approached him again? This decision would shape his entire future as a player. He reflected on his past life, where he had struggled for 10 years before a single constellation, late bloomer model student, finally reached out to him. At the time, the constellation's appearance had felt like a beacon of hope, filling him with excitement for a promising future. Yet, despite his initial optimism, nothing had changed. For decades, he had remained stagnant, and by the time he turned 55, he had come to a harsh realization. He never truly understood the value of a constellation's power. The ridiculous requirements for unlocking their full potential had rendered his contract almost useless. A player's artifact and title stats would only double at level 850, triple at level 900, and quadruple at level 950. However, he had never come close to reaching those levels, making his contract meaningless. In the end, his only saving grace had been the opportunity to regress, granted by that same constellation. For that, he was grateful. However, it also meant that he had to be extremely careful this time. He could not assume that he would be able to regress again. With the immense power, destructiveness, and fortune granted by holy luck, he finally made his choice. Shin Songyun accepted a contract with the Goddess of Luck. Even in the event of a player's death, a contract with a constellation remains valid for 30 years. As Shin Songyun finalizes his contract with the Goddess of Luck, a being from another dimension carefully observes the exchange. Almost immediately, 15 friendly constellations extend their congratulations, offering their support and wishing him well. However, 3 hostile constellations, ones that had originally intended to form a contract with him, declare their intent to sabotage his progress at all costs. Shin is taken aback. This level of attention was far beyond what he expected. Despite his confusion, he extends his hand toward the Goddess of Luck, sealing their partnership with a handshake. The goddess praises his wise decision, expressing her excitement about their future together. However, before Shin can process everything, a system notification suddenly appears, revealing the Goddess of Luck's contract effect. Tell me your wish. He is presented with 3 powerful abilities, each one more overpowered than the last. All attack attempts will result in a critical hit. Any artifact ranked unique or higher will have its hidden effect unlocked. A 100% chance to obtain an artifact from middle bosses and boss monsters, regardless of their rank. Reading through the options, Shin is completely shocked. Each of these choices is game-breaking, granting overwhelming advantages. But before he can fully process them, another message appears. The contract effect isn't over yet. The 4th ability grants him an exceptional stat boost. For every point invested in luck, his stats will increase by 2 instead of 1. This retroactive effect will also apply to all bonus points he has already used. With 100% critical hits and guaranteed artifact drops, he realizes that this power is a direct result of his own efforts and perseverance. The Goddess of Luck then asks what he intends to do about the other constellation's offers. Without hesitation, Shin responds that his focus is solely on her now. The Pilgrim of Grand Space acknowledges his choice but states that he will wait for their next encounter. Meanwhile, the Cleaner of a Fallen Dimension issues a chilling warning, vowing that he will do everything in his power to sever Shin's head. Yet oddly, he seems in a good mood while making the threat. Unfazed, the Goddess of Luck praises Shin for standing his ground. With her abilities now enhancing him, he no longer needs to worry about the immediate future. He simply needs to stay calm and wait for an even greater opportunity ahead. Shin Songyun enters dungeon number 101's final boss room, prepared for the ultimate battle. Without hesitation, he clashes against the towering foe, the consumed by greed Goblin Lord. The impact of their attacks reverberates through the dungeon, the sheer force of their collision shocking even the Goddess of Luck, who watches intently. However, instead of being intimidated, Shin taunts his opponent, questioning if this is the best a final boss can offer, demanding a greater challenge. The Goblin Lord retaliates with a fierce roar, brandishing its massive weapon and launching a relentless assault. Songyun meets the attack head-on, his sword colliding with the monster's weapon in a powerful display of strength. The battle intensifies as the Goblin Lord's attack gets dodged by Shin moving back. Enraged, the Goblin Lord's eyes glow with a menacing red light as it activates a powerful ability. The system notifies Shin that he has been inflicted with the status ailment. Overwhelm, rather than panicking, Songyun smirks, recognizing the skill. Though not as effective as stun, Overwhelm has the ability to suppress a target's will to fight. The Goblin Lord attempts to capitalize on its advantage, but Sang-yoon swiftly activates his recovery skill, nullifying the status effect. The ground shakes as he evades a powerful strike from the Goblin Lord, which momentarily falters, realizing its attack did not go as planned. Sang-yoon acknowledges the limitations of Overwhelm. It doesn't completely stop movement, but could still be useful against weaker enemies. Determined to turn the tide, he activates Recovery once more and decides to test his luck. As the skill takes effect, the Overwhelm status is deactivated, shocking the Goblin Lord. Shin Sang-yoon taunts his opponent, questioning whether it really thought its move would work. Activating Demon Bash LV.1, he successfully stuns the Goblin Lord for 2 seconds, providing him a brief opening. Without hesitation, he capitalizes on this moment, unleashing a powerful slash. As the stun effect prolongs, Shin repeats his attack, extending the stun duration by another 2 seconds thanks to his skill effect, Delay. The Goblin Lord, unable to react, screeches in agony as it remains paralyzed. Realizing the skill's effectiveness, Shin marvels at how even the second effect of Delay activates successfully, pushing the stun duration even further. The Goblin Lord, in desperation, attempts to retaliate, but Shin anticipates its movements, swiftly dodging and countering with another decisive strike. With each second that passes, the Goblin Lord finds itself helpless, unable to break free from the relentless assault. Eventually, Shin lands the final blow, defeating the Goblin Lord and clearing the dungeon. As the battle concludes, a notification confirms his victory. The suffocating Goblin Swamp dungeon has been cleared. His level increases, and he acquires a D-rank title, Don't Touch Me, marking yet another step forward in his progression. With a sigh of relief, he acknowledges the battle's intensity. Shin Sang-yoon, exhausted yet victorious, exclaims that it's finally over as his player status screen appears, confirming his level up. He has obtained the D-rank title Don't Touch Me, which grants a boost of plus 30 luck and plus 10 evasion, along with an additional effect that strengthens one of his skills based on the system's buffs. Reflecting on the hardships he has faced, including being pursued by thugs and enduring a tough dungeon, he wonders if he has been pushing his body too hard. The Goddess of Luck appears, playfully commenting that his ability to survive proves he must have incredible luck. However, Shin believes people would assume it was due to skill rather than luck. The goddess, amused, insists that luck is also a skill and expresses her happiness in supporting such a fortunate player. As Shin checks his status, he notices that his luck stat has already surpassed 100, triggering a bonus effect. When any stat exceeds 100, related abilities receive a 10% additional bonus. He realizes this enhances his evasion rate and artifact drop rates. Looking over his rewards, Shin sees the fallen Goblin Lord's shield and discovers that he has obtained the Shield of Kudnis, a silver artifact. The shield possesses a special effect called Sacrifice, which allows it to convert damage taken into health regeneration at the cost of consuming mana throughout the process. Shin Sang-yoon acknowledges that thanks to the Goddess of Luck, he now gets guaranteed item drops. This leads him to wonder if increasing his luck stat will also improve the quality of artifact drops. As he picks up the Shield of Kudnis, a notification appears indicating that mana synchronization with the artifact has begun. The Goddess of Luck excitedly embraces him, showing her enthusiasm. Shin notes that while she may be supportive, she is likely to be more troublesome than his previous constellation, the late bloomer model student. The scene then transitions to a new location, the quest area near Jamsil Station, where Shin is seen negotiating with an official. However, she firmly rejects his request, stating no. Despite her refusal, Shin tries to persuade her, explaining that he understands her concerns, but has his own plans. She insists that he reconsider his decision, visibly struggling with the situation. Shin, determined, reflects on how much he has endured, including dealing with numerous bodies that day. He resolves not to let this setback stop him. 2 hours earlier, a car speeds down the Honam Expressway with Shin inside. He reflects on his recent acquisition, the Goblin's Shield, feeling relieved that he also managed to grab some rice and kimchi. Just as he prepares to enjoy his meal, a sudden disruption occurs. The car starts flashing multiple red warning signals. Shin, completely caught off guard, struggles to understand what's happening. Frustrated, he contemplates whether it's finally time to get a new car. However, his concerns extend beyond the malfunctioning vehicle. He realizes that staying in his current situation is unsustainable. At his current level, he's statistically at a higher risk of being dragged into crime-related incidents. He can't keep living in fear. Moving to a player town, where constant surveillance ensures security, would make things much easier for him. As he contemplates his future, his focus shifts to his growing need for equipment. To ease the financial burden, he considers purchasing second-hand artifacts rather than investing in brand new ones. But ultimately, the real issue remains money. He needs a lot of it, and right now, there's only one place where he can realistically amass that kind of wealth: the system created alongside the Age of Players. This system brought quests, organizations, and the governing body responsible for managing them, the Players Association. If he wants to succeed, he needs to find a way to take full advantage of it. Shin heads straight to the quest arena, determined to take on a high-level dungeon. However, upon arrival, he is immediately stopped at the entrance. A staff member, a concerned woman, insists that he should only enter a dungeon that matches his level. She simply cannot understand why Shin, who hasn't even been officially ranked yet, is attempting to enter a level 100 dungeon. Shin, however, is unwavering in his confidence. He assures the woman that he won't cause any issues and pleads for her trust. Despite being only level 17, he believes that entering a low-level dungeon would be a complete waste of his time. The staff member, on the verge of tears, tries to reason with him. She recalls hearing the exact same argument from someone else before, someone who ended up facing dire consequences. She desperately begs him to reconsider and go to a more appropriate lower-level region. Shin understands her concerns. He knows that many players have met their demise by overestimating their abilities. However, he also realizes that if he wants to grow stronger, he must remain resolute. Just as he solidifies his decision, another woman enters the conversation, asking what the issue is. The staff member brushes it off, trying to avoid escalating the situation. The newcomer introduces herself as Kim Miso, a member of the prestigious Eden Guild. She is level 100 and holds an A+ rank, an impressive feat. Shin immediately recognizes her as Kim Miso, the marksman of devastation, the first player to reach level 100 and earn the prestigious marksman title. But her skills aren't the only thing that makes her stand out. She is also the daughter of Kim Yoon-cheol, the president of Shinsang Biotechnics and a major shareholder of the Eden Guild. The implications of this are huge. Kim Miso belongs to a guild that boasts some of the greatest players in the country, including Shin Tiri, the Shadow Assassin, renowned as the nation's deadliest assassin player, and Cho Jinho, one of the greatest swordsmen in the country. In other words, she was born with the greatest diamond spoon in player history, inheriting both status and power. Yet, despite all her influence and reputation, Kim Miso looks at Shin and simply remarks that she has never seen him before. Kim Miso asks why he's so determined to take on a level 100 quest. Without hesitation, Shin replies that he simply needs the money. The other players nearby take notice of their conversation. They're shocked that Kim Miso is actually talking to him, and even more surprised by Shin's attitude. Some assume he must be crazy, while others speculate that Kim Miso is just being kind to a level 17 newbie. Shin, however, can clearly hear their murmurs, and their whispers irritate him. Kim Miso warns him that this quest will be extremely difficult, but Shin remains unfazed. He confidently states just 4 words: high risk, high return. He clarifies that his attitude isn't personal. He doesn't hate her or anything. Even though she had rejected his request to join her party before his regression, he insists that he doesn't hold a grudge. Kim Miso then drops an unexpected revelation. Solo player parties aren't allowed in this quest. Shin is taken aback. Now that he thinks about it, the solo player quest ban is only set to be lifted 4 years from now. After an awkward chuckle, he decides to brush it off, saying he must have misread the announcement. He then thanks Kim Miso for informing him. But just as he's about to move on, Kim Miso makes him an offer. She invites him to join her party. Shin freezes. The surrounding players can't believe what they just heard. Kim Miso, the legendary marksman, inviting this guy. They're filled with envy, wishing they were in his place. Shin, however, grows suspicious. What is she plotting? Instead of answering right away, he cautiously asks what the conditions are. Kim Miso smiles and casually replies that there are no conditions. Can't she simply help out a fellow player? But Shin just laughs. I've had a hard time trusting people. Kim Miso chuckles as well, acknowledging his skepticism. However, she insists that she truly has no conditions. Instead of setting terms, she simply asks Shin to make her a promise. If Shin ends up disappointing her, Kim Miso expects him to pay for it. However, if he can back up his bold claims, she promises to sincerely apologize for doubting him. Hearing this, Shin finally understands. She's testing him. Kim Miso's influence extends far beyond being a mere player. The clothes she wears instantly skyrocket in price. Anything she says is immediately picked up and published in countless articles. But there's one unspoken rule about her. If she deems you an overconfident loser as a player, your career is as good as over. However, Shin doesn't let that intimidate him. He remains steadfast, refusing to show even a shred of doubt. Instead, with a confident smirk, he simply suggests, "Then why don't we leave right now?" He's determined to prove himself, and more than anything, he hopes this will turn out to be interesting.